Hey, and welcome to GenreChat. I'm Caleb Walton, and today our guest is Miss Michele Chynoweth. Hey, Michele, how are you?
Hi, Caleb. I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing great. We're still recovering from the storm. We just had the hurricane come through, so everybody's getting power turned back on and getting back into the swing of things. So we've been really busy. How have you been doing?
Great. I'm in Maryland, so we weren't hit at all.
That's great. That's great.
Yes.
That's good. Well, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, about the genre you write, and you have a very specific genre. First, I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit more. Michelle, I know you're a speaker and book coach. You've also had a lot of awards. I think your novel won a CILO award for suspense fiction, and actually The Faithful One, your novel The Faithful One, has just been named as a finalist for the Top Shelf Indie Award. Is that right?
Yes.
That's exciting. Congratulations. Well, tell us
Thank
a little bit more about yourself and the different things you're involved in.
Okay. Well, I am the author of three books that are out so far, with a fourth coming out next year. And I'll tell you a bit about more about them coming up. I'm also an inspirational speaker. I speak at a lot of writers' conferences about what I do as an author, help other writers. And that led me to become a writing instructor at Cecil College in my hometown of Northeast Maryland.
That's
I,
great.
I teach writing your book and also how to get published, and whether it be self-publishing or finding a literary agent to go traditional publishing. And then also marketing your book. I have 30 years of marketing experience. After I graduated college, I was a news reporter, both on air and with newspapers. And then I went into marketing in the advertising world and had my own ad agency for 20 years. So I know a thing or two about marketing. Of course, became an author along the way. And so I'm teaching what I know. And that has also led me to become a book coach. So some writers have come to me saying, can you help me with editing, proofing, help me get published, whether it be on Create Space or otherwise, and help me market my books. So I've helped several writers become successful authors as well.
That is awesome. I love that you had that newspaper experience and the marketing. I bet that was really interesting and probably helped a lot when it came to like the novel writing too, having all that experience behind you.
Yes. I've always had my hand in writing.
That's great. That is awesome. I'm the same way. I know. I noticed on your website you were talking about your first book was written on a binder, like a spiral binder. I was like, I can remember doing that with the little crayons as a kid.
As a kid, yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about your contemporary Bible stories. That's the three books you said that you've had out so far. I mean, I'm really interested in learning a lot more about that. First, define that a little bit for me. I mean, exactly what does that all entail for that genre, and why did you decide to write in that?
Well, I'd like to say it chose me, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. But my novels are contemporary suspense with a little romance, fast-paced fiction. I call them edgy, inspirational fiction. They're based on Old Testament stories in the Bible because I feel like those Old Testament stories are hard to read. I feel like Old Testament stories are, easy for us to understand today. So I don't touch those, and thus you could consider them Christian fiction, but also outside of that, Jewish people, can appreciate them too and read them too. So they cater to a really non-denominational and even universal audience because they are edgy and modern day. So I reimagine the stories in the Old Testament in a contemporary way with characters and plots that we can relate to today. But I stay true to the plot. The way I came to write this, I'll try to cut it short, but I've always wanted to write since I was 10 years old, and life happened, graduated, got married, had kids, was a news reporter, went into marketing, had my own business, got divorced, lost my business, got remarried, acquired two more kids, life, right? Got to pay the bills. But along the way, that writing bug bit me again, and I wrote this, what I thought was the next great American novel. It was about being a reporter. They say, write what you know, and a destiny a doomed love affair. And it won the drama fiction contest with the Maryland Writers Association.
Wow.
Yes, but the prize was literary agency representation with Writers House in New York, a big agency.
That's a wonderful prize. That's a really good
Literally,
prize.
but the ending wasn't so good. 9/11 happened, and they were in New York, and we all lost the prizes. That book never saw the light of day. I shopped it, and it was before Create Space,
Wow.
and we literally lost the prizes, and I was devastated. Driving along, and literally the thought hit me out of the blue. You should write a story or a novel based on the book of Job. At the time, I said, I wasn't a big Bible reader. I knew the Bible. I'm Catholic. I heard the, reading at Mass, but, I was like, why, I just wanted to be rich and famous at the time, big time author. I thought, how is that going to get me there? And it wouldn't let go. So I started to write it, and I realized God was tapping me on the shoulder. I was going through a lot of Job-like stuff, losing my marriage, losing my business, losing my health, losing my kids who were becoming teenagers. And I had the family disease of alcoholism. And in the end, God brought me through all that. In writing the book, it helped me, and then I help others. So fast forward to today, I'm living my dream as an author, speaker, book coach. I also am happily remarried with 5 kids between us, great relationships, and I have been in recovery going on 15 years. So life is good. And that book, based on the book of Job, became The Faithful One, my first novel, and set me on the path to this genre.
Wow. So you literally lived through the story as you were writing it. You kind of
Yeah.
along with it with the characters. What an incredible story. That's amazing.
Oh, thank you.
That's really neat. I know I was really struck when I was reading the summaries for some of the different books. I think which was the Runaway Prophet, the one with Jonah. It
Yeah.
really, I was like, wow, this would be good on its own without being based off of anything. How do you take the Old Testament stories? I mean, what inspires you to modernize them? I mean, how do you go about choosing what themes to change and what to keep the same?
Well, so that story hit me, and I want to say called by God. And I got it self-published originally through an assisted self-publisher and Author House, and not Author House. Yes, Author House. And then and then a Christian publisher picked it up and published it. And they were coming up with a new genre. They said Reimagining Bible Stories. So a friend of mine suggested that I write the next one based on Abigail, and he knew me well. And I said, Abigail who? And he said, look her up in the Bible. So I did, and Abigail becomes the second wife of David, for those who aren't familiar. And but before she does, she's originally married to Nabal, who's a mean, narcissistic, and a bad guy, but power. And I have it presidential. I just, I think modernize it. So David and Nabal are running for president of the United States, and Abigail gets stuck in the middle and has to do and face some risks. And so she actually saves David and the kingdom of, and so she's a pretty important figure. So I had to, look into that, and that became The Peacemaker, my next novel. Runaway Prophet, I was in a Bible study, still fighting this whole idea of, do I want to do this type of writing, this genre? It wasn't, at first I wanted to be rich and famous. Now I realize it's more about following God's call and helping others. And that's exactly like Jonah. So I was in this Bible study, and we were studying Jonah, and I realized I'm a lot like Jonah, trying to God's call, the message. If you try to run, you can't really hide. And just they say, write what you know. So bits and pieces of me are in there, or people I know, or, places. And so I pieced those stories together, but I really stayed true to the plot, but then reimagine them in a modern day way.
That's incredible. I like that. I'm actually really interested to get to read them. I haven't had a chance to read them yet, but looking into them, they sound like something I would really enjoy. What do you find is the main difference between writing in this sort of new discovered genre, and in other types of fiction? I mean, what's the same? What's different? What do you find?
Well, I feel like this is almost somewhat of a unique genre. There are a few other books out there, but I don't know of any that are totally contemporary but stay true to that Bible story. I know of a few others that, touch on the Bible story and maybe are set like in the past, like Francine Rivers, Redeeming Love. Maybe I think that was set in the 50s, or William Paul Young's Eve is that reimagines the story of Eve, but kind of sci-fi. So I just feel like I don't know of any books exactly like mine out there or this particular genre. But what makes it different, I think, is that it bridges the gap between Christian fiction, which, tends to be, very clean. And my books are clean. They don't, they do meet those Christian guidelines, but they're also universal. They have, themes and characters that are real. I mean, the Runaway Prophet's set in Las Vegas, and there's prostitution and there's gambling and there's drug addicts and some bad stuff going on. There's an underground Islamic State radical terrorist group, new mafia, trying to destroy Las Vegas, which is like a modern day Nineveh. Mm-hmm. So, it's real, it's gritty, and that's really what's in the Bible. We just have to,
One of my very good friends, Molly Jo Reilly, she told me one time, talking about that very thing, about how, different kinds of edgy Christian fiction, you can't really show how well God can rescue you from something until you show what he can rescue you from. So, I mean, honestly, it's that kind of thing that needs to be told to point people in the right direction.
Right. And sometimes when God rescues you, sometimes when you rescue others, God rescues you in the process. That's part of the message as well. Yep. So I try to get to that message, that underlying message that I think we miss in those Old Testament stories because they're hard to read, they're hard to comprehend. So I try to uncover that, but not in a preachy or religious way.
Exactly. How has this given you more insight into the Bible? I mean, I'm guessing you had to really dig deep with research and the characters and then, different motivations. Has this helped you when you're studying the Bible in your spiritual life?
Oh, absolutely. So I've actually sat down and read the Bible cover to cover, but so those three, I told you how they came to me, and I'll tell you about the next one in a little bit, but what I do is start with the Anchor Bible series. It's a really good, and many of the books in the Bible, they're like thick, like the Anchor Bible series are good research tools. They get into, everything about the history and the wording and God's messages. And then I also authenticate each one with somebody in the clergy, various denominations. I've talked to Methodists and Baptists and Catholic and rabbis and make sure that I'm following the scripture story. Mm-hmm. I also authenticate people, places, things that I'm not, intimately familiar with, so to make sure they come across as real. For example, I'm a little bit giving away something, but this is a good example. So the whale and Jonah. Okay, how do you make that contemporary? Well, and Jonah jumps on he runs from God's call and jumps on a cruise ship instead of going to Nineveh. In my case, my character is called by the FBI, by his father on his deathbed, to work with the FBI out in Las Vegas to undercover this radical Islamic State terrorist group and their plans to build a nuclear bomb. And instead, he mails a letter to the authorities and jumps on a cruise ship. And he's on this nice Royal Caribbean cruise ship, and the FBI comes after him. He ends up in a submarine, that's AKA the whale.
I was wondering how you were going to do that.
And in FBI custody, and then he ends up back in Vegas eventually working with the FBI. So I don't have any experience with a submarine. I've never been on one, but not under the water, just in the harbor, in Baltimore Harbor. I eventually found a friend whose husband was on a submarine as a mariner,
Wow.
and so I talked to him extensively and sent him the book and made sure that those parts were real. My next book is based on the Navajo Nation, Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel. It's mainly Cain and Abel, but it starts with Eve, and I made her, like the original man and woman in America. They were the, Indians, the Navajo.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, so to authenticate that, the Navajos are very private people. Really had a rough time with that, but I really wanted somebody Navajo to read it and make sure I stayed true. So I called out to Dene College out in Arizona, where the book is set, and he is currently reading it. And the PR director happens to be a native Navajo, and yes, he's helping me out. So
that's incredible. Those types of sources are like just priceless, and I'm guessing
right.
history as reporter and stuff like that is helping you kind of dig in and find
it does. Yes, it does. It does. And for the faithful one, based on the book of Job, I'm Catholic, and I wanted to make my character Jewish. I just did. So I went to a temple and talked to a rabbi and got a tour of the temple and made sure, and I got books out of the library. Actually, that was way back. The internet was, I don't think, here yet or coming around these days, right? You just Google it. But I got a bunch of books out, and I still do tend to like getting some research books as well.
That's good. I like that. How do you research your characters? Speaking of which, I mean, what tools have you used to kind of get in the mindset of somebody 2,000 years or more ago?
Well, I do it more like a contemporary way. So, um, Cain and Abel, my next book, The Jealous Son, it's called, and it's coming out next June. My literary agent found a home for it, publisher, is loosely based on, I have two sons, and they have that sibling rivalry, sometimes that love-hate relationship, and they're in their 20s, and I base those characters a mixture, and I bring other parts in. Like I said, I really base my characters on bits and pieces of people I know, or, and when I think of them, when I visualize them, they say to do like storyboards or cut pictures out of magazines, pictures online. I tend to think like a movie director, like movies, who would play my part, those parts in the movies. So I picked, for example, Seth Jacobs in The Faithful One is in his 50s, and he's like has everything. Job had everything, right? Wealth, health, wealth, and good looks. And I picked like a Matthew McConaughey or a George Clooney, to play him. And I visualize that, and then I go from there.
I do the same thing. I have an extra little tab on my Scrivener program that's full of pictures of actors that are my characters.
Exactly.
And it helps you. It helps you get to know them, so to speak.
Right. And when you're writing that kind of contemporary, fast-paced fiction, I think it should, and they say show not tell, you should unravel like a movie. You should see it in your head. You should be able to picture it. And all we have are words. So I tend to, I think my books hopefully one day will be made into movies. I think they'd make good movies.
That would be great. I think that would be fantastic. Yeah, and I love the fact that you're talking about making them real and slightly edgy, and because I mean they were real people. We think of them as just the paintings or the stained glass windows, but they were real people with flaws and that had the same kind of struggles we do. And I feel like that's something really good your books are going to help show.
Well, thank you.
Tell us a little bit more about your writing process. Are you an organic writer? Well, obviously you have a little bit of an outline, of course, since the plot's already been written. But I mean, do you kind of start out and know everything that you're going to do, or does it sort of write itself, so to speak, or does it sort of speak to you as you go?
I'm a big advocate of a chapter outline.
Mm-hmm.
I teach writing fiction, and I'm a book coach, so I feel like I need a roadmap. I've always been that way. I'm a note taker. So I will write a chapter outline. The thoughts come, but if you don't capture them, especially when you're my age, You want to put them on in writing, and it gives you a roadmap. Like I said, chapter 1, a couple sentences, chapter 2, and so forth. I mean, you're going to veer off of that a little bit, and it changes and evolves as you go along, and you have new ideas and new characters come into play. But at least you know where it's going.
Exactly. I'm struggling to find a place like in between the two. I don't know quite what's going to happen, but I also have 3 outlines that I'm in review, so I'm a little all over the place when it comes to that. But,
right.
what ways, I know you mentioned this a little bit before, what are some other ways that you would recommend somebody research if they're interested in writing these types of novels?
I would say definitely if you're interested in doing this type of novel, first of all, stay true to yourself. Write, authentically. Don't try to write to the market. Right now, Christian fiction's having a hard time selling, so inspirational fiction. But that has not stopped me. I'm not going to, I love this genre now, and I'm really glad God called me to do it. So, and there's no end of characters, right? I think my next
exactly.
I think my next one's on Solomon. Just a little teaser there. So I would just say, stay true to yourself, but definitely do a lot of research. I went to a writers' conference at Towson University, the Baltimore Writers' Conference this past year, and this writer said it took her 5 years to write the book because she comes out usually with she has a lot of novels behind her, and she said she'll go out to, she'll travel to another country if she has to make sure that book is authentic. And last but not least, if you're going to write, I suggest talking to a biblical scholar of sorts, somebody who knows this, knows the Bible.
Yeah, the research is everything. I mean, I've the same things. You ever heard authors that talk about going to other countries or going to the actually interviewing somebody from the FBI and stuff like that, and it really does make a difference. I'm reading a book right now by Davis Bunn, and it's like you reading it and just the dialogue from the police officers talking back to each other. You can tell when it's authentic and when it's not. It really does make all the difference.
Right, and that author I was talking about inspired me to track down a native Navajo from the Navajo Nation, because otherwise, it wouldn't be authentic.
Exactly. And I meant to ask you,
it took me a lot longer, but it's worth
it. Exactly. It definitely pays off in the end. What other writers have inspired you? I know you mentioned that just a little bit just now, but what other writers and other books have you read that inspired you as you're going on this journey?
I liked the books The Kite Runner and A Thousand Splendid Suns by Husseini. I believe I'm saying that right. Mm-hmm. I tend to mix in the Middle East a little bit in my books. There's just something draws me to that. And maybe it's that whole, Old Testament, mm-hmm. I just had a light bulb moment. That's probably what it is. It's like, that's where it all began, right?
Exactly.
Right? And, Israel, the Holy Land, the Middle East. And, his books are set over there. And I love John Grisham. I love a good, suspense. I love thriller. Let's see. I like William Paul Young. I like The Shack, and I actually have met him. We exchanged books, and yeah. And he went from selling books out of his car to selling millions and getting them made into movies. So I know, and because my book is contemporary, but it is inspirational. It's a good example of how books can bridge that gap. And movies can too. It's tough, but it can be done. Exactly. And that's what I'm going to do.
That's awesome. Well, I tell you what, if somebody ever wants to contact you, or where can they go to learn more about your books and the different things that you're up to?
Well, they can visit my website. It's www.Michele with one L, Chynoweth, and that's how you say it, but it's spelled CHYNOWETH.com. And you'll see book trailers, little movies about my books, and more about my my writing and my speaking engagements coming up. I have several writers conferences coming
Yeah,
up.
I also wanted to ask you about that too. Where are you speaking in the next, in the upcoming future?
I am speaking at Canal Town Writers Conference in Chesapeake City, Maryland this Saturday, the 22nd. On October 20th, I have my first keynote address coming up at the Vine and Vessels Christian Writers Conference in Georgetown, Delaware.
Great.
Backing up the weekend before that, October 13th, I'm speaking at Indie Author Day in Towson, Maryland. Spoken before and hopefully will again at the Kentucky Christian Writers Conference. That's next summer. I've spoken at Maryland Writers Association. That's coming up in March of next year. So just check on my website under news and events. I also have my blog posted there. I'd love for you to it's a weekly spiritual blog that hopefully is uplifting for people. And they can find me on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube. Please connect. And my books are on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, even in local libraries and bookstores. Wherever books are sold, just ask. And if it's not there, they'll get it for you.
That's awesome. And I know you also do a little bit of coaching. I mean, is that something that if somebody's interested in having some writing coaches, is that something you offer as well?
Absolutely. I love helping other writers. I love editing. I think that's my news reporter editor background. I just love it. And they can visit me on my website for that, which is bookcoachmichele.com.
I like that. I'm constantly correcting people. People always want to spell my name with a K, and I always have to correct them with a C, so I know exactly what that
Oh.
means. Before I let you go, I know you've given a lot of advice, a lot of really good advice. If you had just one thing that you could tell someone, even if it's not specifically in this genre, an aspiring writer that's trying to get published, trying to get that first manuscript done, what would your piece of advice for them be, your piece of encouragement?
Don't lose your passion. Stay at it. Carve out writing time. Carve out time for you. You're worth it. I have to carve out large writing chunks of myself. I can't just sit down for an hour in the morning type of thing. I need to say, okay, don't bother me this weekend. Shut it all off, shut it all out, and get in your, writing cave and write. And stay true to yourself, like I said, and get an editor because your eyes can miss things. You need somebody else professional to read it. I paid thousands of dollars my first time, and I'm glad I did. I learned a lot. I learned how to write dialogue well, and I learned a lot. So it's worth that investment into yourself, and you never get a second chance to make a first impression. So make that first book perfect.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I really enjoyed getting to know you, getting to learn more about your genre. I really hope we can have you back on the show sometime in the future, and I'm actually really looking forward to reading your books. One more time real quick before you go. When is your next book coming out, and what's the title of it going to be?
June of 2019, The Jealous Son.
Jealous Son. Okay. I'll definitely remember that. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, Michele. I really enjoyed getting to know you, and we will
see
you guys next time.
Thank you.